Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm sorry for not having posted any video for the last few months. I was simply very busy as a Berkeley undergrad. Recently it's dead week, so we don't have classes during the next weeks. So I got some time to record some new videos about macOS development because it's something I enjoy and I hope you enjoyed it as well. So today our goal is to build an app that looks like this. I have already built it, but I will start from scratch again and just walk you guys through the process of making something like this. So the idea is that you have some object. I just use a square because that's probably the simplest object that you will make. So you have a square, and then if you move your cursor here, you will see that it changes to a hand icon, and then you can drag it around. There's like a hover color, and then there's like a pressed color, and you can just drag it around like that. There's nothing so special about this, but I think that this is a good foundation for many things that involves dragging in your future macOS apps. So if you do enjoy this video, that's good. I'll break up this series into three parts just because this is a little bit longer than the projects I did in the past. Alright, so hope you guys enjoy. The first thing that we'll do is we'll start a new Xcode document or project. Alright, so let's just close the one I built already. Let's start a new one, new project. Okay, I'm just going to call it drag view, and then I'll save it on my desktop. I'm going to create a Git repository and then upload the code once I have finished the tutorial. You don't have to create it if you don't want to. It doesn't really matter. Alright, so we're in. Now before we actually start building anything, there are a few things that we need to set up. I assume that you have some familiarity with the Xcode interface. I'm using Xcode 10 right now. So I chose a storyboard application, which means that everything is organized into controllers. So here is a window controller, here is a view controller. We'll be mostly working in the view controller. More specifically, we'll be subclassing a NS view and then try to build some interactive functions on it. But before we do anything, let's create a few classes because we'll be subclassing the window controller, the view controller, and maybe some other things. Alright, so let's make a new class called window controller. It will be a subclass of NS window controller. Oh, actually, that was the default. I'm sorry. So you just press next, and then that will create a file. Alright. So let's create one more. A new class. Let's call it interactive view, which is the NS view that we'll be subclassing and adding the drag function and the drag gesture recognizer onto it. It will be a subclass of NS view. So let's type that and then press next, and then just save it in the project directory. You might have realized that unlike iOS, macOS, there isn't a thing called drag gesture recognizer. So you can't just implement the thing I did with just some default classes that Apple provides. Instead, you have to implement everything from scratch, or at least that's what I know. Oops. So let's go ahead and actually start building things. Alright. So first, we need some kind of a view, right? Because otherwise there's nothing that we can interact with. As of Xcode 10, the shortcut to create a new view is by pressing Shift, Command, and L, which will bring up a search window where you can search up any UI object and then just drag it to place it somewhere on your view. So let's search up a custom view because we don't really need any provided feature, and then just fit it nicely in the main interface, right? And then press this button to do some auto layout so that this view will resize along with the window, right? All right, so here we are. So this is the view that is connected to this window. Let's also rename the window to something that's more meaningful. All right, so let's change it to interactive drag view. Okay, and let's set the title bar to transparent because that looks a little bit nicer. We technically support full screen even though it's not necessary. I just clicked on the settings because that's how I usually make applications. Okay, so now let's also connect our subclass window controller to this window controller so that we can write code for it. So type window controller here, it automatically completes for me. So now this class is the same class as our window here. So if you go here, there is a default method that says window did load. So this is where you can type some code to set up the window if you want to. So here, something that I will do is I'll set the background color to white because that creates some contrast with our interactive view. So I'm going to say window. Window dot background color equals to dot white. Okay. Now, before we start making this interactive view, we probably need to define some constants because there are a few colors that we will be using. Specifically, there will be a color for the square. There's another color for hovering on the square. You see it gets a little bit darker here. And then one more for pressing down. This is not necessary to create distinct colors for these actions, but I feel that that will make the interaction more user-friendly, and it's easier to see whether your gesture recognizer is working. So I'm gonna just create a new document with some constants, right? So Swift file, and then just constants. Okay. So I'm just gonna define a few colors that we'll be using. I've already put some of the colors here. This is probably all I need for this application. So here we have a background color with 0.92 or 92% white. So I'm going to say let BG color, which will be the background color of the interactive view, let this one be a NS color with white of 0.92 alpha 1. Okay. Now we define the square color, which is the color of the thing that we will be dragging around. I'll just copy it from here. You don't have to use the same colors that I do. Just do whatever that you feel comfortable, as long as you can distinguish between the colors. So I'm going to call it square color, and let it be this. Similarly, for hover color, I'll define hover color equals to that, and then press color, but press color equals to that. Okay, cool. So now we have defined a few colors that we will be using for the interactive view. Now, we probably need to subclass this one here as well, because now it's not really connected to this file called interactiveView.swift. So we want to enter interactive view, and this will make this NS view a interactive view, which is a subclass of it. Okay, so now we're here. Just to test that everything is working, let's set the background color of this interactive view to the BG color that we've defined in constants, which isn't very difficult. Okay, so if you're not familiar with how to draw things in macOS, this will be a good chance for you to learn, because this is something that I find really interesting about drawing things on macOS. So in order to fill the background of the interactive view with the constant color that we've defined here, we need to first create a path, an NS Bezier path. And the reason is that how you draw anything in Swift is by first creating a path, then either fill the path, filling the region that is enclosed by the path, or filling along the curve, which is defined by the path object. Okay, so let's set the background path, which is the border of the interactive view, to this dot bounds. Okay, with this self dot bounds. I'm so used to Java programming. I think I used to Swift. Okay, so what this does is BGPath now stores the boundary of the interactive view, and then now we're gonna call a fill function that fills up the interior of this bounded region. Okay, so let Bezier path equals to okay, actually this is a very misleading name. I should really call this boundary. Okay, so let BG path equal to NS Bezier path, and then we're gonna pass in the rectangle that is the boundary of the region of this view. Okay, so here you have a BG path. This path goes around the interactive view, and then now we're gonna fill in the space inside using the color we define. Okay, so we're gonna type bg color dot set fill, which means that the next time we fill up a shape, it will be using this color that we've specified. Okay, so after typing this, we can write bg path dot fill, and then this will fill up the interior of our interactive view nicely using the background color here. Okay, so let's see it in action. So see if it actually works. Okay, cool. So now we have a window that is in white background color. That's how I defined it in window controller.swift. And then we also have an interactive view which has a nice background color of a light gray that we can use to distinguish between the window and the interactive view. Okay, so for the last part of the first bit of this tutorial, I would just add a new tracking area. So now we can actually track the position of our cursor inside this view. Okay, so the way that you would do it is by going to interactive view and then create a overriding method for awake from nib. So if you're not familiar with this method, it basically overrides the superclass. So it allows you to write some code to initialize this object before any other method takes place. Okay, so here we're going to add a new tracking area, which is the exact frame of the interactive view, so that when the mouse enters this view, we can actually track its position and know what we should do about it. Okay, so let's set let tracking area be a new tracking area, and this tracking area, and then you see this prompt comes up. Okay, now the rect is basically the bounds of our object. A thing to note is that bound and frame are almost the same thing, except frame gives you the actual location of the interactive view of this object inside the window, whereas bounds give you a NSRect that starts from position 0, 0, or the origin. So here we want to use bounds because when we're inside the interactive view, the bottom left corner of the interactive view is treated as the origin for this view. Okay, I'm going to write this self.bounds. And the options, we see that here we need to specify how we want the tracking area to behave. So in order to do that, it's better to just create a variable that specifies how we want the options to be set. Okay, So let's set tracking options. Be a ns tracking area dot options equal to a new array, and it will contain some items of things that we want. For example, for this demo, I want the cursor to be tracked at all times. So I'm gonna say active always. Also, we want to track when the mouse moves in and when the mouse moves out. So we're gonna type mouse entered and exited. And then finally, we need mouse moved. Okay. These three turns out to be sufficient for this whole program to work. Okay, so that's all I'm gonna specify here. You can experiment with your own stuff if you want to, but these three are sufficient to get this app working. So we're gonna specify tracking options here, and then the owner will be this object because we'll just be writing code here. There's no need to write a separate class for the delegate methods of tracking area. So owner is going to be self, and then we don't really need to pass in any info, so I'm going to pass in nil. Okay, so now we have a tracking area object, and we need to activate it. The way we do that is by typing self dot add tracking area, and then specify the tracking area we want to add. Okay, it looks like there is an error somewhere. I know exactly where that is, so I'm gonna compile and see what happens. Okay, I accidentally mistyped. Okay, that's the typo. Okay, now if we build, it should start working. Okay, so build successful. So how do we know whether we added the tracking area successfully? Now, to do that, we want to actually track the mouse, and some things we can do are mouse entered. Okay, so just for now, we can just print out some lines just to test whether this function is working. So mouse entered the view. Okay, mouse exited, print mouse exited the view. Alright, these are just some examples, and the whole point is just to see whether this view is actually able to track the mouse movement. Okay, so as you can see here in the console, it's printing out various messages when I move my mouse inside and outside. So this is good. Okay, and this is probably the first step that we will take toward building the fully functioning drag view. Okay, just before I end the first part of this tutorial, just want to add a new function here to track the actual coordinate of the cursor once it enters the interactive view. The way I would do it is by using by overriding the method mouse moved. Okay, so mouse moves gives you an event, right? This event is basically the cursor event. So how do we know where the cursor is? We can let location be event dot location in window. So the unfortunate thing is we can only find the location of the mouse in the window. This is all the information that is provided. But we don't really want the location of the mouse in the window. We want the location of the mouse relative to this UI object, which is in this view. So let's first define this. First extract this information from the event parameter. And then let location in view to be convert. And then there is this nice function that is able to convert a point from a view to the current view. So this is actually just self.convert. Okay, so we'll pass in location, and then we'll convert it from window dot view content view. Okay, so what this does is it will convert the location of the mouse from the window to the location of the mouse inside this view. So we want the view to start at 0, 0, right? The bottom left corner of this view. Okay. Let's run it and see if it works. Oh, we haven't printed out anything. So let's do print location in window, in view. Okay, so as soon as my mouse moves, you see that there is a prompt that gives me the coordinate of my mouse inside the window or the view. I don't know yet. So let's see if I move my mouse here, what does it say? Okay, this is pretty close to 0, so my guess is that the convert function is working. So I feel like this bottom left corner does give 0, 0 here, even though it doesn't quite get to 0 because it's never exact here. But this is a good sign. This means that we are now able to track the mouse movement, and this will be a good first step toward trying to create a gesture recognizer that is able to drag stuff around. Okay, so that will be the end of the first part. Okay, if you want to do something, you can pause here and just try to do what I just did.